Who do you think Arnold is?
Well, I've got a theory. Could be Bernard, a robot Bernard. No, something isn't right there. I've got a theory. Could be Dolores. He hid himself inside a massive robot mind. Yes, I've got a theory. We should podcast fast. Every week, a new hot take. We cannot take them back.
Welcome to the Valley of the Unknown, the place where all things end, but an end is just another beginning, because this is Westworld, my friends. Nay, this is Westworld Theories. I am Jim Scampoli.
I am Jacob Burrows speaking to you from the Valley Beyond the Valley Beyond. It's like the day after tomorrow over here, or is it the day before all those days? We don't even know what time it is. Are we on the moon? Yes. Welcome to Westworld Theories. We're discussing Season 2, Episode 7, Les Écorchés. I can't do it. I don't know.
Yeah. You know, it's got one of those titles. We did look it up. It refers to, in art or sculptures, when you have a body that's kind of stripped away of skin, so you can kind of nail the anatomy. And I mean, much like we see in Westworld, like with those white, weird faceless hosts, or even at the beginning as we see the bodies being created, or as we see in this episode with the many shells of Bernard or Dolores without her skin.
Yes, and this episode was directed by Nicole Cassell, her first episode, and written by Jordan Goldberg and Ron Fitzgerald, where I think Jordan Goldberg is new and Ron Fitzgerald has done episode 3 of this very season.
Yeah, and I gotta say, it's quite an interesting episode. I mean, I guess it's very Westworld of Westworld, where it feels like we're getting to the point where things are about to become known, but then like they're not really known. Although, are we at the point where we throw out the theory that Bernard's in some sort of simulation?
I mean,
or is this part of the simulation?
We can't throw anything out, Jim, because we might need it later, and we might need to point at it and say, see, we knew all along. So let's not throw it out. Let's put it in the corner. Let's put a blanket over it and, like, pretend it's not there. And then at the end, we can, if we need to, do a dramatic pull the blanket off. Aha, we had it here all along.
Yeah, I mean, because there's a lot of big moments in this episode, which, I mean, I think it's a very enjoyable episode. I mean, we got Bernard and Ford. We got Ford kind of steering Bernard in a direction of maybe answers, where, you know, they talk about, you know, it's decoding the person, not decoding the host. Although I still don't know what that means. And well, I mean, like, because he's like, no, it's not about living forever. It's about making a copy of them. Okay, isn't that kind of like living forever?
Well, yeah, but I felt that they laid it out fairly clear. I mean, I feel they've done a pretty good job of hinting at something so strongly that people like us will, you know, will get it or piece it together or read it on Reddit. And then in, like, the next episode, they lay it out. And I felt that was them laying out, you know, the whole thing about...
To what end, though? That's what I'm saying. To what end? Why do they want copies of these people?
Well, well, I mean, there's a whole bunch of potential benefits. The first and easiest is selling it.
But to who? Like, what do they do with it?
The people. I mean, they make you immortal for, like, it's a Netflix thing, and you pay every month.
But that's what I'm talking about, because he says, like, Delos wouldn't want to make a deal just to be immortal. He's a businessman.
No, but for him to be immortal, like, he wouldn't put all this money just into him becoming immortal, is what I think I read it as.
Hasn't that been, like, of course, like, that's been, is this new information? I guess they were acting like this was new information. That's what was confusing me, because I was like, okay, so then what's the point?
Yeah, I think that's actually literally what it was, because we've been talking about this for episodes, and this scene was like Ford giving exposition, and Bernard's like, you mean they want to live long time beyond the valley or whatever? Like, it was like, what? They want to live forever? And he is saying, like, yeah, they don't want you to go out and take over humanity. They want to become you. So it's just everything we talked about, I thought.
Okay, I mean, I guess I just don't quite get why they'd be so secretive about it then. But I guess it's because it's not done. Because it's like everything's so secretive. It's like the people I mean, I guess they don't need to be self-aware. Maybe that's part of the decoding or whatever, the end game. It's just weird where it's like, so people go to Westworld, but they don't know that there's potential for them to maybe live forever as a host.
Yeah.
But like, would it make a difference if they knew?
Well, that's a good point, but like this is why people don't announce their video games like 20 years in advance either, because you're gonna get too hyped, and then they're gonna be mad that they didn't get immortality all of a sudden.
Check in with a little company called Squaresoft, my dude.
Yeah.
Swish
Yep.
head.
Swish. That's true, but I mean, it's still they could make like there's so many potential benefits where they could make people immortal, but then also obviously control them too. So I don't know, but and also I guess if people were there to rape and pillage, they wouldn't act the same if they knew every little move was being recorded, and then they wouldn't act genuine.
True self, I guess. Although I don't know. I mean, I guess like we're jumping right to it, which it's fine. We're allowed. It's their own show.
Yep.
Hey,
Westworld jumps around too, huh? Am I right? Yeah.
And maybe it's just I'm trying to make more from it than what's there, and that's what's confusing me, because even some of that rationale doesn't really wash for me. Because yes, someone who is like essentially in a dream world will maybe act different than they act in a real world with laws and consequences. I don't know if that necessarily means that that's their true self, but I guess that's just more of a philosophical argument I could have with Ford when I sit down with him in this dream world.
Yes. No, absolutely. But yeah, I mean, I felt at least we didn't I thought you were saying we didn't get very much new stuff here, because when you said that it wasn't very clear, I was like, which part? The only thing I feel is unclear is, well, still not even that, because Stubbs or whoever keeps asking like, oh, what does this decode? And it's like, we know what it decodes. It's like all the information, right? That's the thing, right?
I guess. I mean, yeah, I'm still kind of, I mean, I guess it can be assumed for that, but then there's still the idea, because she even says like, you won't know where to put it. Like, even if you have this encryption, you don't know what you're decrypting. But I mean, as we know as the audience, at least what we think we know, Dolores does know what she's decrypting, because she spent so much time with Arnold, and Arnold showed her whatever this is. Because there's still, I mean, this is by design, just the show hasn't told us yet, but I mean, there still is some sort of variable thing that's filling in some of these blanks, I guess.
Yeah, and even William showed her like the thing, like the valley or whatever it is, just to show off the place that got filled with water, where we assume all this stuff is.
Well, don't you understand? Here's my actually, you know what? I just came up with this theory just now.
Shoot.
The water, right? That wasn't there before. The water.
Yeah.
That's the new what was the place that Bernard was just in? Where all their backups were?
The cradle.
Yes, that's the new cradle.
You think they're
not dead? They're in the water. And then what happens is they're going to package this water as like bottled water and ship it out to the world. And when people drink it, become a host.
Yep. Hey, we'll put it in the corner right next to the Bernard loop virtual reality theory.
Because it's decrypted in the water.
I mean, you're probably not as wrong as we might assume at this point. But anyway, let's zip through the episode, right?
Before that, just one more thing. Yeah, I guess that's what it was. I mean, I was clear with what Ford was saying, but I guess he was saying it in such a Ford way that I kept thinking there was an extra layer I was missing, because I'm looking at it this way. I understand it's because they're trying to get this formula down, and it's not working, as we've seen with Delos. They were trying over time. But does Johnson Franklin, the creator of this big company, CEO in the world of Westworld, that they are sitting there trying to build a AI version of him, but he's dead. He's been dead for 10 years. Is that information? I guess that is still valuable, isn't it? Even though it's technically not him, but it is him, they're arguing. Like, is he going to wake up and be like, I've been dead for 10 years. Oh, wait, but now I'm a host.
I don't know. I guess they're getting better and better at it. Like we've already seen, they can't really even do this stuff. So what is the value of the information then? But on the other hand, seems to work fine if you want to go into a matrix because Ford's all like, well, if you put me in a body, I'd explode. But in here, I'm fine. It's like, are you? Are you sure?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah, let's get into it. I mean, obviously it's not supposed to be fully clear. This is Westworld, and Ford does speak in a certain way where he gives you information and makes you wonder about it. But we first start out with Bernard and we see flashes of his son. And like just Bernard's whole deal. And then we cut to what is most likely to be thought as present day, and Stubbs is there, I believe.
Yeah, Stubbs is there like, hey, we got to go, Bernard. These people are fucking crazy. We got to call this satellite phone. And Bernard's like, huh, what? Like he reacts to everything. And then this, what's his name? Strand pulls up with a gun and is like, let's go for a walk. And they bring him over to where Bernard killed his girlfriend on the orders of Ford. I guess kind of making it a bit of a cycle here. At the start of the episode, we see where Ford made him kill someone, and at the end, he's doing the same thing.
Wait, say it again. I'm sorry.
Oh, just that he's. I was being not an actual cycle. I'm not saying this is a time loop. I'm just saying, thematically, he did like we're reminded of how Ford has manipulated him in the past, and I was kind of disappointed in Ford. Like the most interesting thing isn't like, well, I gotta. Like he keeps saying all this stuff, and then he's like, "Well, but I gotta control you real quick. But I gotta take control of you, though."
Yes, and I mean, and back at like this point in the episode, towards the beginning here, they're talking like this isn't actually a rescue mission. This is some sort of project, and then the security guard who was he Skarsgård?
Yeah.
So now we have a Skarsgård and a Hemsworth both in this scene. Neither of them are as well known as their family, but and I do like. I was expecting that this was going to be drawn out where it's like it's either one of you guys, it's either Bernard or Stubbs, but I'm thinking you, Stubbs, and it was going to play out for a long time. But luckily, they kind of nip it in the bud because they find a secret door, and because there's always a secret door. Is it the door we're looking for? I guess not. I did think for a second, like, is this the door they've been talking about? Yeah.
Well, I gotta say, this is literally like remember, this is in like Ford's childhood home where there was a door that Bernard was like, what door? Like the original door where we find out who he is. And then he went down, and apparently there's another fucking door down there.
And it's behind, like basically behind the murder spot, right?
Yeah. Best place to hide your doors.
Looking at the murder spot, but then they find the secret door, and then we see the shells of Bernard's, which I did kind of not really spoil because it was in the next on Westworld, but I mentioned it last week.
Yeah.
And this kind of an aha moment for Charlotte. And I always forget security guard guy's name, the Skarsgård.
Yeah, Strand.
Yes. So then they start digitally waterboarding Bernard to try to get information out of him.
Yeah, and this is kind of a big step. I will say, like, it feels like absolutely nothing has happened in this future timeline, if you think about it. It's only been Bernard walking around looking at tigers, like, huh, what? And then they're, like, looking at Bernard, like, what do you think, Bernard? And then we get a flashback. So this is literally, like, it's the cat's out of the bag as far as Bernard being a host. Granted, all these characters around could die very easily or turn out to be hosts, one way or the other, so it might not matter that they know. But, him and Charlotte have been having, like, they had a slight buddy cop phase earlier in the season, running around trying to survive, and that's certainly been turned around, because now she really wants to know, what did Dolores do with Abernathy's, brain box? What did she do? Even though she probably clearly took it and went to the place where the stuff is.
And this weird thing, I mean, things are always convoluted on Westworld, but now we have Charlotte in the present time looking for Abernathy's control unit, and also in the past she's looking for, I mean, I guess technically at this moment she has it, but it's not like, usually we could at least be like, oh, okay, here she's doing this, here she's doing that, so we would get a better idea. But now it's like, okay, no, it's still Abernathy, and now she's still looking for Abernathy. Here we are 12 days later.
Yeah, don't forget. I mean, they're also in the same place, so just to
Yeah,
make it even less clear. But I mean, yeah, it's kind of clear. It also, I guess, adds up why she's being so cruel to Bernard because her position of power was threatened by Dolores coming in and doing her like, oh, I'm gonna cut your eye out and all that stuff. So, and she did like get really shaken by that. But yeah, she does say, you tell me what you remember, I'll tell you what I remember, and that's when we figure out, oh, this is the episode with the attack on the Mesa, where we're gonna find out what happened. And I'll tell you, Jim, I don't care that much because we already know what happened because we're in the present, right? So almost
yeah,
everything that happens in the Mesa, like sure, there is interesting stuff. The stuff with Bernard is what's interesting, but in the Mesa, like, oh, are they gonna get it out of his head? Yeah, probably. Like they
yeah.
got a big thing, they'll get it out. And oh, are they gonna shoot all the security guards? I was talking to a friend about this, and it's like, yeah, apparently they knew who the extras were because they just blast them as quickly as fuck. And I saw someone post about real stormtrooper syndrome here because it's like supposed to be this top tier of security, and even this Irish character or who with the big mustache who is acting like, oh, I'm actually the tough guy, and he dies, and everyone just dies, and it's like, yeah, no shit. We're in the future. We knew you all died. You never were real characters. Who cares?
Yeah, and we've kind of talked about it last week of how we're just constantly going through corridors of dead bodies, and even kind of in the past flashbacks as well, we're seeing that, but then especially in the future. So we understand that, yeah, people just get mowed down.
Yeah, there is a scene where they pull up on a bunch of dead bodies, like this is the these are our friends. It's like, yeah, no shit, it's Westworld.
Well, and I was trying to get a hang on, like they have these colored vests that are supposed to like direct them towards where hosts are, I guess.
Oh yeah, I guess there was one time when one lit up, right?
Yeah,
And they were
it
like,
was
ooh,
supposed to tap in. I mean, I guess it again was bringing up the mesh network, and it was somehow tapping because at first, we followed that one team with the slick back hair, cool guy, and he's like, "Oh, in the dark, there's one," and then then we cut to the other team who find the dead bodies, and then I'm like, "Is this the guy's team that we just saw kicking ass dead?" No, it's just some other team, and then their things light up. It's like behind you, and yeah, it doesn't really. None of it really means anything. They're trying to add weight to some of these characters because it's like, okay, here's slicked back guy and here's gray haired guy, and they're both kind of tough members of their team, but they're going to get dispatched. And slicked back hair guy gets dispatched in the worst, laziest way, I would argue. But we'll get to that.
oh, I just figured out who slick back hair guy is because I saw him. Obviously, I saw him in that scene, but I wasn't even paying that much attention that I even knew who that character was throughout this episode. Literally just was blind. I just saw people shooting at people, and none of them are like people to me.
They showed him kicking a little ass this early in the episode. He was the
Yeah,
first one kind of going through the dark and kind of shooting blind because he was wearing this vest that
right.
didn't help the other team out at all. But yeah, anyways, the more interesting stuff, we kind of touched on it already, but Bernard and Ford, and they're in the letterbox
Cradle.
version of Westworld,
Yeah.
having a good old grand discussion about decoding the guests, and the hosts serve as a constant, while we the people are the variables. And it is kind of a fun answer to the question. Like, I'm sure we've even asked this question. I'm sure it's been asked a million times on the Reddit, is why is the storyline the same 30 years later? Like, wouldn't people just get sick of that? Who's playing the same game? But they have a clever answer for it because it's like just testing you and keeping that data of how you react to situations so they could build a host you.
Yes, and we did say last week that, of course, Ford is going to be all, cryptic and weird. And it's like true to form, the first lines he says is some poem or something about holding infinity in the palm of your hand and an eternity in an hour. And I have heard that before. I don't remember where, but it's, he's got to do some quotes and things. And Bernard has to look confused and say, like, how are you alive? And we find out that, yes, indeed, he was directed to make the brain ball of Robert Ford and putting him into the cradle. So that's how he got scanned in. And again, he's supposedly a real person in the machine, quote unquote.
Yes. And now because they talk a lot about, and I mean, we saw it in the Delos episode where he couldn't last. Like you start to break down, and Ford even specifically talks about it, how he could live here in the cradle, but if you brought him to the outside, he would break down. Now, I guess Bernard technically isn't Arnold, so he doesn't count, right? Bernard is just a well-programmed host. He's not necessarily this ghost in the machine, or is Bernard special?
I think Bernard is, though, because they based him entirely on memories, just like they base every other character on memories.
That's
Although he, yeah,
And this episode does go over that Dolores helped kind of bring Bernard to Bernard, right? Like through those their own tests that they were kind
yes.
of doing within the cradle.
Yes, although he does say that, like, oh, you're different because with Delos and stuff, they were testing for fidelity to be as similar as possible. And I don't remember his exact line, but I think he basically says that, no, I want you to be better. Like, I want you to be the next step. I don't want you to be the same murderous pieces of shit that we humans are. So maybe you're not. Maybe he's not exactly like Arnold. Maybe he's better. Except then Ford's like, well, just real quick, I gotta make you commit lots and lots of murders first, though. Just and then you can be better.
Well, yeah, because Ford's thing, like, and it's weird because I mean, obviously, with Ford being killed at the end of last season, and this season kind of being more focused on Delos, like, it's hard to really get a gauge on the park itself because season one, it just felt like Ford was the man behind everything. I mean, and because clearly he was doing secret shit, and it felt like they were trying to figure out what he was up to. But
Yeah.
now this season's been all about how more like William and Delos have had this secret plan. And I mean, clearly Ford is in on that a little bit, but it's still hard for me to gauge like who was fully in charge, or I guess it was like they were both sniping behind each other's backs the
Yeah, I
whole
mean,
time, or
we did have them smuggling data out still in season one, Delos, but it was a revelation to us as well when Charlotte Hale was like, "Oh yeah, here's our secret lab in in the park that we have. We have like dozens of these, Bernard." When Delos turns out to have all these places, including to clone Delos himself.
but then,
Um,
I mean, the question really, I guess, is because we know William was working, or the Man in Black, whatever you want to say, was working on what we've seen with Delos. But then this information they're smuggling out, is that have anything to do with William, or is that some other party that we're not fully clear on yet?
Well, that's a good question because I think it's pretty clear that William is not the one driving for finding Abernathy. I mean, he
Yeah.
doesn't care about that. In fact, he's going, we think to the same place, also with the same goal as Dolores, maybe. So also he's probably a host at this
Yeah.
point, or at the very least, he's fucking dead because he gets shot 20 times in this episode. So if he just like sort of gasps for air, if he just I was just picked. There was a scepter behind the rock. If they pull that old trick out of the bag, I'll say, okay, well, so he's definitely a host then, and I'm not even kidding.
Well, I guess, and it's back to like figuring out who these higher ups are. I guess they have made mention of like the board, right? So
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. That Charlotte has sort of come to William, like, oh, you gotta, William, what are you doing? Come on. Or she didn't say that because that would have been a huge spoiler in season one. But oh, Men in Black, what are you doing? Come on. And he's like, oh, you do your shit, I'll do mine. And like, you just want to play with your guns.
there's been this more spiritual push and pull between William and Ford, I guess, and that's kind of playing out in this narrative that we're seeing. Whereas now, like, it's grown so big that there are these, cliche, like, stuffy bored people that also want like their own profits or their own whatever, I guess, at least from what I'm reading. Because yeah, you're right. I can't see that William is involved too much because he's in this like battle with Ford. And it is interesting. We get this showdown between the Man in Black and Maeve. And they're kind of both left for dead for the most part. I mean, but clearly we're not done with these characters, so something's gonna happen.
This was also an interesting part of the episode to me because the Man in Black, it's funny that literally every person he runs into, he's like, Ford, you dropped your old tricks again, Ford. And everyone's like, I'm not, who's Ford? What are you talking about? And I mean, it has been a little bit over the top that Maeve has her mind control powers all of a sudden, but we're reminded that, of course, it doesn't work on humans. Like, she's just been controlling her human friends anyway through her maxed out charisma, I guess. And we get a confrontation where it's not super clear who's going to win, except the Man in Black does get shot like 20 times.
Yeah, but the interesting thing is, since what we know of Ford is he's completely hypocritical. I mean, as we even see, and we've been talking about with what he does with Bernard, is that Maeve could still be part of whatever Ford's plan is. And I mean, we do know that Dolores, at least with the show showed us, is it seems like Dolores was part of her awakening. Um, so that's the thing. I mean, because I'm always questioning, like, because I mean, I know the creators have even said, and she's like, no, this is my own thing. This is my free will.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I just don't buy it because they could easily just be like, well, nope, Ford was controlling her all the time, all the whole time, and giving her these extra benefits to do whatever for this specific purpose.
Ford is such a Machiavellian Littlefinger type character, and you get into trouble whenever you have someone like that because it's like they pull all the strings. And he can't just physically control people. He just also has all this information so he knows what everyone will do even when he's not controlling him. And that's what he says to Bernard when Bernard says, oh, you did all this before Dolores shot you because you made her do it. And he's like, I knew she would do it. I didn't compel it. She's free now. That's what he says. And it's like, yeah, it's kind of the same thing because she's still doing what you planned from before, right?
Yeah, because I mean, even just the fact that she's tracking down Abernathy and getting the data that Ford presumably doesn't want to get in Charlotte's hands, it works so well in Ford's favor that, yeah, I guess you could either be like, well, no, Ford's just a genius and he knew that would work, or Ford did literally program that. And then it's his whole thing of like, well, she has free will, except for this one thing that I want done. I need this thing done. Then besides that, free to go on your own. You're basically the next evolution of person and host.
Yes, and SC in the chat says, why does Ford keep saying that Bernard has choice and free will, but then takes control or influence at every opportunity? Which we sort of touched on already, but it is like the central thing with him where even though he said like, well, I'm done now, cheerio, let's hand it over to the robots and be done with it. And even though he does that, it's like, not really though, because I'm a robot now, so that means that I handed it off to myself.
Well, yeah, and then especially, yeah, the fact that he has to, like, I mean, also it's such great timing because, you know, Ford is living, you know, high on the high in the cradle, but then he just in time is able to infect Bernard and basically be the ghost in Bernard right
Yes.
before they destroy it. So he's still out there in the world.
Here's the thing, though. He did say, when I'm out in the world, I'll degrade and explode all of a sudden because I can only exist here in this cradle. And then, like 10 minutes later, the cradle blows up. So, is he gonna just keep degrading? I feel like they're just gonna have him in his brain, and he's gonna be this ghost in his brain, and they're not gonna make him degrade because he's too cool to have around. Because logically, what should happen then is that he gives dumber and dumber instructions to Bernard as his brain goes bananas, and he just keeps spouting about infinity in an hour.
Given the show hasn't said this, but I read what I think they're gonna say is that since he's not like in control, he's tethered to Bernard. It's almost like a small version of the cradle somehow, and that's how he's able to live. But I mean,
but Tim, he is in control. We see that at the end of the episode, remember? So that would be bullshit if they did that. SC says, I think he created all the Bernard bodies so he can replant himself every time he degrades.
That's I mean, I could totally see him doing that as well. And actually, although rethinking there's been this theory, I'm not sure if you in the chat have been aware of the theory, but the theory is that this kind of present day we've seen of Bernard when he wakes up on the beach and they're kind of trying to get information out of him could potentially be just yet another simulation to try to get this data. And maybe when they show him the shells of Bernard, that's just the previous Bernards they've gone through. But it's just a way to, you know, get him to the next step. But we'll see.
Yeah. I guess I'm not as into that anymore as people have been. Although what was I thinking of? That we've also talked about how maybe he's maybe Bernard, the Bernard in the past, dies and an Arnold brain ball clone takes over. And I feel this episode makes it clear there's not a difference. Like, he is the brain ball Bernard because we ran you through simulations digitally over and over and for years and years, even though probably they can speed up the speed in the cradle, I would hope. So they just loaded him and got him to the point where he is as close to Arnold as doing any type of brain ball thing would be, because the way you do that is based on input about that person, and they had that from Ford and Dolores. So he is Arnold no matter what body he's in.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and then moving on a little bit, we get this idea that Dolores believes that the backups are actually chains that are like keeping them tethered. I mean, I guess what the idea is, maybe the backups aren't as enlightened, like they'd have to go through everything again to get to the point they are now.
Yeah,
Uh,
or that they're in control. I mean, I wonder if she would have been okay with taking them with them, because then you'd be immortal, but you'd control your own backup thing. But then again, if you have this brain ball, it is in your head. You can presumably load that onto another computer if you have the technology for it. Meaning that the backups are just a way that's like a prison, and it's not really a mobile thing. You can't take your backup with you. But I don't know. What's your take?
well, I was getting some big time Altered Carbon vibes. That's the name of that show, right? The Netflix
Yes.
one that we
Hmm.
watched one episode of.
With another
Because
scar. No, is that a scar card?
no,
No,
that's
I just
Kingdom
it's just another Swede. We do have other ones. I keep forgetting.
Well, because I mean, honestly, I just was distracted because I was just thinking, like, getting rid of your backup and kind of making it like for keeps. What I was like, what did I watch recently that had that? Because it feels
Yeah.
like every sci-fi thing is now like a robot and downloading, uploading your consciousness. And
Yep.
I was like, oh yes, altered carbon. But I don't know. I mean, I guess yeah, that does add a layer where since they have shown us these brain balls that can be kind of taken, it's taken from Abernathy's head in this episode, and we saw that one was basically created and Bernard brought it to the cradle. But I guess I was reading it more that Dolores was trying to go for keeps, like she was trying to get it to where it's not that simple, but maybe I was just reading too much into it.
No, I mean she is in a way. I mean we've also seen her killing hosts,
Yeah.
so like she wants to be more in control than the Mesa. Like she's also like Ford, saying like everyone's gotta be free, but I gotta control them real quick. But everyone's gonna be free, you know. I mean she's done that very literally with Teddy and everything, obviously. Um, I did have one question on the other storyline that we sort of mentioned briefly with the Man in Black and Maeve and everything. I did like the way it played out of him like going outside and getting shot at by his own friends, because she can use that power to do that. But then it doesn't really work on Lawrence, the Man in Black's friend. And she says, "Oh, I'm glad you're awake." Which makes me feel like, okay, so if a host is closer to consciousness, has gone through more suffering, I guess they can't be manipulated as easily by this power.
Oh yeah, I mean, I guess I didn't catch that, kind of like a fool. I was reading it as it was almost proving that Ford was still pulling the strings in a way. But I think
Mm,
what you're saying is a better read, and thinking about it, it's planting the seed where if she does have a showdown with Dolores, she can't control Dolores that way.
yeah, like she kind of. I mean, she could have tried at the end of the episode, like pick me up,
Yeah.
let's go, but she doesn't. And it probably wouldn't have worked. But it's also interesting because I guess he's closer to waking up, maybe because of more suffering, or I'm not entirely sure. But he looks at the Man in Black and starts to remember all this shit that he did when he did do all the bad stuff. That he stopped happening earlier this season. He did last season, so he remembers that, and yeah, it kind of starts to make Lawrence a character because he hasn't been before. He's literally just been like his lackey.
Yes, yeah, and I like that actor a lot. So, I mean, I'm down for it, even though what he gets gunned down immediately. I mean, everyone gets torn up. I was excited because I thought it was going to be interesting if they did save the Man in Black and they brought him back, but no, he like stashes away somewhere bleeding. So if they can't take him and help him, I mean, I guess not.
Yeah.
We find out later it wouldn't have been much help anyways because shit's going down back at the lab, of course. But
Yeah.
it's really hard to see, what is he going to find, another one of those cheat areas that has a first aid kit and fix himself up real quick?
Well,
Where's the
no, his daughter is gonna pull up
Yes, of course, of course.
And we gotta mention that
House?
speaking. Sorry, what?
No, sorry, go ahead.
Speaking of daughters, Maeve's freaking daughter sees all this and she goes into a panic and she runs away. And Maeve's there like, no, no. And the Ghost Nation just picks her up. And we're back to, where are my dragons? Where's my daughter? It's going to be the whole season. I thought we were done with it.
Well, I would say that for as good as the writers are for like weaving this tangled web and having people speak very cryptically, they are awful at like the character getting away or being taken, because it rang very similar to when Abernathy got taken in that earlier episode from Dolores. Like
Yeah.
it's such a clumsy way of like, oh, but they're over there. Oh, they're gonna get taken again, and the journey continues.
Right as everyone is pulling up, the Ghost Nation are also pulling up. And why do they want this kid? We don't know. I thought it was earlier that, you know, it was a human child or whatever. I don't think so anymore because she looks the same and it's been years. Yeah.
Well, I will say, and again, I mean, I hope people don't think the next on are spoilers, but like, because we think things get to a certain place at the end of this episode where it's like Bernard says where the Abernathy unit is. The previews for next episode, it looks like it's all Ghost Nation stuff. So get ready for that.
Cool.
Get ready. It's all about Ghost Nation. So don't even worry.
Okay, cool. And what's his name? Leon? Is that the writer?
Oh yes, I believe so.
Yeah, he's they're gonna kill Maeve, and he's like, no, she's not like the rest. We need her. And I mean, yeah, he betrayed them, but like as we talked about last week, like he didn't really betray much of anything as far as I'm concerned. And also, where are the rest of her entourage? Because she was like, I need to do this alone to go and get my daughter. And then they presumably stood in the distance and watched the Ghost Nation come up, watched the Man in Black come up, and these trucks, and they were like, she still needs to do this on her own, I guess. Like, where the fuck are those idiot technicians?
Yeah, where's Felix? Felix was like, I'm gonna help them.
Where's the Snake Lady and also Dragon Lady?
Yeah, I don't know. I do like that it just seemed that they, like the Man in Black and Maeve, kind of stumbled upon each other. I did like how they just like smashed together. I guess we'll see where things head from that. But we do see Arnold's house. I know we kind of already went over the Arnold stuff, but is this, you know, are we going to see this house again? Because it's been told to us that it's important when he was building it and showing Dolores, and now we saw that he built it in the cradle. So is there secrets in this house?
I mean, I think so, because he said that everything that Arnold created, he created here or something like that, or you were created here, and so on. And although, I mean, I will say we were pretty into like, oh, they're showing this symbol a lot, this fucking brick symbol. And at this point, I'm like, it's just the shape of the brick, man. Because that is a real building as far as I understand it. I mean, I saw it on some post where, yeah, this is where they shot it. And it's like, well, they didn't rebuild the house just to get the symbol in there. Like, they've already got their symbols this season are more words like repeating the Valley Beyond and the door and glory rather than the maze symbol. So this symbol does not seem very important at this point.
Yeah, very true. Well, yeah, I do want to talk about when they blow up the cradle. What a stupid scene, I have to say. Because it becomes this like sex thing. It just seems so corny to me, like that you're gonna stop in the middle of this and be like, well, wait a minute, this host was programmed for fucking, bro. Like maybe we can get a quickie in. Like what is happening? Why is this scene playing out the way it is? I thought it was dumb.
Yeah, I mean, it is pretty dumb because these are supposedly the top tier security. They come in like, Stubbs, you're a piece of shit. You can't do anything, which granted, you know, yeah, they're right. He was the head of security. Look where he got us. But at the same time, you would think with their flashy vests and everything, you know, you kill him. And yeah, maybe he saw, oh, she's unarmed, so I can fuck her. And it's like, no, you can't. Like, this is the weirdest. This is a scene that would happen in Westworld as part of a storyline because the cowboy was this stupid, not the person who knows that they're all killer robots.
Well, and especially like, okay, let's say we buy into this and he is he thinks he's gonna have sex with this sex robot. She's already shot in the chest and bleeding everywhere. I mean, I guess people have their own kinks. I don't mean to kink shame, but come on, guy. Let's fucking be realistic here. But anyways, yeah, it's a corny ass scene where she flirts with him and then pulls a grenade pin, which makes a gigantic explosion for some reason. I guess what, because he had other grenades or something on him.
Yeah, like, so the whole point of that is, as you said, we want to play for keeps, but it's like, so you just killed your suicide bomber then, which is fine, but you can throw grenades, right? Like, there could have been another way to solve that. Why did that character have to die? Did she need to go and be on some other show? Like, or is she going to come back and it's going to be like, oh, it's still not for keeps? Well, I don't even know.
SC in the chat, I got the impression they were trying to save Maeve from the approaching humans. Oh, like the Ghost Nation. Yeah, that's well, it's weird. We go back and forth because Ghost Nation was thought to be protecting the humans and killing the hosts. So who knows? Maybe that daughter is a human, and that's why they were protecting her.
Can't wait to learn about Ghost Nation. I got the impression they were Dolores and Teddy counterparts. What, the people in the Ghost Nation?
I didn't get a read on that.
Oh, yeah, I was just reading the comments.
Oh, yeah.
From SC. And also, maybe she's equipped with pheromones. I guess so. I mean, she is perfect for sex, but not too submissive, but not blah, blah, blah. And you can have a long rant about it.
Well, and yeah, she says you want to leave them wanting more. Ching!
Yeah. I agree that scene was dumb.
And then, I mean, we also go into the scene where Charlotte's about to get cut up. And I guess the only tension of that scene is because clearly Charlotte doesn't get hurt unless this is the reveal that she's a host. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's really the only thing they can play up, because for the most part, nothing can happen to her. Or at the very least, if something does happen to her, it's either this was the person version of her, and in Bernard's timeline, she's a host, or she's just been a host the whole time. But then, of course, it's always like a convenient, like, we saw it previously with Maeve and the Man in Black, like right as they're about to kill the Man in Black, here comes the cavalry, and everyone gets shot up. And then at this point, she's about to chop Charlotte's skull open, and then they just hear gunshots in the distance. Although, then Abernathy does wake up and becomes lucid, and that's finally what Dolores out of it.
Yeah, and I guess Dolores does try to shoot them as they run away, but that's literally like the only time that any host misses anymore, because they probably have all their stuff boosted up. So of course she misses at this point. And as you said, it's not a very tense scene. She gets, although it does balance out the previous scene where she's waterboarding Bernard, because if she wasn't anti-host already, she tries to like spin it. She tries to, oh yeah, this is a miracle what you've managed to do here, Dolores. We don't have to be enemies. To be fair, I mean, their whole plan is to turn people into hosts. So, I mean, as long as the host stopped killing people, I think they might have been cool with it somehow. But I mean, probably not. They're probably, they're a big corporation. They're bastards. But yeah. So there's not a lot of tension in that scene. There's not a lot of tension in the cradle or anything going on in the mesa. The only interesting stuff in the mesa is with Bernard, which we again get back to as he's running away. No, yeah, he has to send her away.
Well, what got confusing to me is because, I mean, the way this show plays with reality, especially when we're seeing it from Bernard's point of view, because all this stuff is going on and Bernard and Ford are just talking, and it's like no one sees them. So I'm like, okay, they're not really there. But then I guess they are there because Bernard shuts everything down.
Well, Bernard is there. Ford is.
Well, I mean, yeah, Ford's not there. But you know what I mean? Like, because no one thinks like, hey, there's Bernard, shoot that motherfucker. Mm-hmm. Like, they just, I mean, I get that they're all fighting around him, but it just felt too convenient where for most of the scene, I'm like, oh, okay, Bernard's just in his weird mind trip right now. But then he actually turns everything off. So I guess he was there. He just happened to be very lucky to not get caught up in any type of crossfire with all the stuff that was going on around him.
Yeah, and I thought the same. I thought, like, maybe there's a glass, they're behind the glass. But then, like, no, he's just there typing away, doing his little coding with his fist. So, yeah, you're right. And, he sends Elsie away by giving this thing of, like, oh, we got to get a car. The only way there's any chance if we get to the Valley Beyond first. And she's like, right, I'll go get a thing. And he's like, yeah, I'll catch up with you. And I'm like, Well, that's not what I would do in that situation. I wouldn't be like, okay, we got to go really, 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 really fast. Let's split up. And what are you going to do, Bernard?
Yeah.
Where are you going, Bernard? Shouldn't we both go? Because we're going to the same place?
Well, and what system is shut down that gives them free reign? Was it just,
I do.
was it, I mean, it wasn't the mesh system. I mean, I know it shuts down the Mesa.
I honestly don't know at this point. He does smash
Okay.
this thing. What is it that he smashes? I guess the power in the building or something?
Yeah, maybe it just opens up like the law. I don't know, like the
The
security law.
security? Yeah.
Yes.
I mean,
Uh,
if we're wrong on this, please do send a message to
yeah.
westworldtheory@gmail.com or
Well,
showswhatyouknowshow@gmail.com because, yeah.
I guess it's just because it's tougher because I mean we just had this big moment where they destroyed the cradle, and I completely understand what's going on there. You know, it's the backup of the hosts and the systems and all that good stuff. But then Bernard, well, Arnold to not Arnold, Ford to Bernard is like, we need to shut it down, Bernard. We need to finally have free reign.
If we
And
shut down what's left of the system, I'm just finding a quote, Dolores will have free
of
reign.
course, we'll have free reign. That's what it was. Okay.
Yeah,
I guess
which
it must be the security then. So now she can freely move throughout where and get to where she needs to be.
but that was already down. He does say she'll murder them all, and I feel in a way this is almost probably a ham-fisted way to get the line from episode 1 to make sense where Bernard says, I did this, when you
Uh,
see all the dead people, because
yep.
this is somehow tied to that.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. I guess we'll see the effects as the season finishes up. I think that when I always like when Dolores and Maeve interact, so I thought that was very interesting. I was completely just waiting for them to like join forces, and then Dolores was going to fix her up and like make the bullets hover out of her skin or whatever with her mind. But
Yeah.
she's left there, and well, they have like, of course, they have a discussion about free will and how they need to go to the next step. But Maeve calls her out on hypocrisy because she can even just by looking at Teddy, she knows Teddy's a whole new man.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess this also ties into. I mean, Dolores says, there was a leash holding us down, the cradle, and yeah, I mean, if Maeve was there, they could have just put old Maeve in Maeve's body with the backup, and now they can't. Like, they can scrap her, they can do something from scratch, but they can't make the Maeve the person she was go back to what she was before because there is no backup.
Yeah, so I mean, I mean Clementine, who's been sludging around in the background, they can finally get rid of her because we saw her have a big death scene with, I guess, the Écorchés behind her. Now it all makes sense because remember when she dies and
Yeah.
in the glass behind her?
It
There we
looks like
go.
it's holding her. It's like a guardian angel over her shoulders as she falls.
Yep.
So
But I mean, I guess, but the writer's still slinking in the background, which I assume he has some sort of medical training as part of a writing research he did on a episode of ER back in the day. So he'll be able to save Maeve at some point once the hosts leave.
Oh yeah, I mean, made a point in this chat about Bernard in the control room that the humans think he's human and the hosts know he's a host, so no
Yeah,
one's gonna attack him, and also he's not attacking anyone else. So I guess it makes sense.
yeah. I mean that works as good as anything.
Yeah.
I'll take it. I mean, to be fair, it just ends up being a cool looking scene because I mean, visually it was cool. I was just confused with the actual like logistics of what was going on. Just because, especially because you know how Westworld is. It's all you never know if it's like a vision or an actual flashback or just someone actually viewing their own flashback. So it just threw me for a loop for a second.
Yes, and speaking of which, after Ford takes control of Bernard towards the end of the episode, and we see flashes in the dark of both their faces doing the same thing, showing that he is in control of Bernard, we get a bunch of flashbacks and flashes in general that all feel sort of the stuff you have before a reveal, where you're like showing bits and pieces of the past season, but it doesn't really reveal anything. It's just part of what they say in the present that, oh yeah, his mind has been debugging itself for over an hour trying to put this shit together. And so we see a bunch of different flashes from different walks of his life, like his son and showing Dolores the city and all sorts of things.
Yeah. And like I know they're just playing with us because I'm just waiting for the shoe to drop on like how his son didn't exist or his wife doesn't exist or it's something else or whatever it is. So I mean, I think they know enough to at least play around. That's why we're seeing stuff like that, just to kind of mess with our heads. And I did forget beforehand when Ford, of course, has to show up in Bernard's mind and tell him about the first library that was burnt down with like, the first 10,000 stories, but we didn't lose those stories. We got a new story of the library burnt down. I love and hate Ford so much.
Yes. Yes. Jonathan in the chat asks, why didn't Maeve disable herself from feeling pain with her superpowers? Yeah. I mean, fair. Good question. Hey, pain makes you human though. So if she had her technician, wait, does she have a tech? She doesn't. She did have her techs, but they didn't. They didn't have the iPad anymore. They lost the iPad, so I guess that's why.
Well, I guess that's when Felix is going to show up. Would be perfect for this.
Yeah, that bastard.
But it also does seem like, I mean, again, this is getting more into logistics of what makes a host function. But if she's so like woke, if she's such a woke host, it would almost be like, okay, these shots to the body mean nothing. I mean, I guess that's an extension of what he's saying, turn off the pain. But I'd go even a step further, like, okay, this doesn't really, I can just start fixing myself, and this is not a big deal.
Well, like hardcore Bernard, pain is just data or whatever he said when he got his head chopped off or chopped open. Yeah,
pain is another program.
Yeah. And I mean, speaking of Bernard, and we're at the end of the episode here, he does tell where the important brain ball has been relocated to, except they do it weird. They do it they do it through the glass at first. And if anyone out there is a lip reader, please tell me if he does say the same thing, because when they come in, she does say, "Tell them what you just told me," and he says the place, but it's like, why did you shoot it that way? Like, I would get that might be what would happen, kind of, because they couldn't hear it, but like, why did you make us, the audience, not hear it? Is it just the biggest red herring ever? Or is it that Charlotte and Strand are not necessarily playing for the same end goal here? Is she sending them somewhere else on a goose chase and she's gonna go to the place? What do you think, Jim?
No, I think that's, yeah, it's weird because I do know the writers do play with us in that way, and this is like a perfect example of that. But it does seem like there would have to be more meaning to this, and that there has to be some sort of ulterior motive going on here. Because why else? Why else would it be like that? Why else would it be this secret thing? And why can they not hear what's going on in the other room? But either way.
Yeah, I mean, although we did have in season 1 a bunch of very clandestine conversations happening where it's just glass in between and they're talking about uprisings and all sorts of shit that just has separated by glass. And I guess it makes sense if the glass is very, very soundproof. I guess one of the reasons could be that just to hammer home, because she has to say analysis when she says, "Oh yeah, tell them what you told me," and he's like, "Oh, why? What do you want?" And she says analysis, which sort of makes him go blank, and then he has to obey. Which, by the way, shouldn't he be free of that if like every other host is at this point? He's part of the revolution, isn't he?
No, it's hard to say because it feels like that stuff kicks in kind of by convenience.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Maybe Bernard still isn't as woke as we thought he was.
Yeah, or maybe if you know someone's a host, maybe if you, I don't even know, man, because they have the iPad, but they've had iPads before and they haven't always worked. Like Bernard is like the wokest, and he's got Ford in him, and he still is getting controlled.
Yeah, and also, I mean, this is nitpicking nerdy shit, but it's never accidentally like Bernard's been in the room and they say analysis at another host and Bernard just freezes up and starts
like Alexa. Oh yeah, that's true. Well, yes, maybe it feels like they should have had a cable to his fucking brain from the iPad, because we've seen how that makes a difference, where if you're hard connected to something, it'll work. But they're literally outside the glass like, "Oh yeah, we're waterboarding him right now." So I don't know. And then Strand says, "Oh, we're going for a ride back to the valley beyond," which we, assume is where all the bodies were that they dug out of the water.
Yep.
And that'll be next episode, unless it's all with the Ghost Nation, as you said.
Yeah, I feel like it's not going to be next episode, or maybe they'll flash to it at the end. But I think we're going to be spending time with the Ghost Nation.
Yeah, and in the chat, this may be a reset Bernard after he washed up on the beach with no memory. And I guess, yeah, if you reset, if you hit the old reset button, he's not going to have the same protection. Obviously, the memories are in there, though, because that is what Charlotte says. Like, hey, you got it all in there. You just can't access it. Go ahead and access it. And he's debugging it all real quick, or rather, real slow, because it's been the whole season, but we're getting there.
Yeah, yeah. How many? I mean, we probably don't know, but how many episodes is this season? Only 10, like before, or?
I mean, there's 10. I think there's 10. I mean,
I
there's
wasn't
10
sure
we
if they were
know of.
I wasn't sure if they were going 12 or whatever. I mean, it doesn't feel like they should. Not. I know that sounds pretty negative, like I'm shitting on the show, but like, it does feel like 10's a nice, because things feel like they're ramping up and getting to a place. I wouldn't want them to have to stretch that out. You know what I mean?
I mean, they've released the names of the first 10 of the 10 episodes, and we know the directors of them, and we know the 10th episode is on June 24th.
Okay, so
and yeah, I think I looked it up before, and yeah, I think it's supposedly the finale, which means there are just 3 episodes left, which is weird.
it is weird, but it did feel like this episode, even though it didn't quite blow things open, things were happening. Like I was kind of saying at the top of the show, I mean, we got Ford's back in ghost form. We had the Man in Black get all shot up in all his limbs and chest.
Yep.
We had a nice showdown with Maeve. They found out, or at least in this version, they found out that Bernard's a host. So it does feel like things are being set up for an end game. So yeah, it would make sense to start winding it down for some reveals after we spend some time with the Ghost Nation.
Yes. I mean, yes, the name of the next episode is Kiksuya, which does seem like it's probably a Ghost Nation word. And yeah, I mean, it's all those things you mentioned are good. I just felt like, I know this isn't the case, but I felt like 80% of the episode was just Mesa, people shooting at each other, and Charlotte trying to get the thing out of her head, and then Dolores of his head, Abernathy, and then Dolores trying to get a thing out of Abernathy's head, and characters dying who we already know are dead in the future. And I know that was probably like 15% of the episode, but it felt like there was a lot of that stuff to me, which is why this is not one of my favorite episodes. It's like that stuff was all footnote stuff that we already knew happened, that we going through the paces, which is weird because in the future we're still in the Mesa and it's still fucked up, and but power's back, but we're in the Mesa again, and now we're in the past in the Mesa, and blah blah blah.
Yeah, and it's like we keep spending time with Teddy, but we know that Teddy is just at least going to be a floating body soon. So, his journey isn't that interesting. I mean, he's dark and he beats that guy to death or whatever, but it's like, all right, Teddy, we'll see you in the water, bro.
Yeah. Well, the real question is those people in the water. What up with that? That's the real question, I think, because I mean, it seems like it's something of Dolores's make, or Dolores or the Man in Black's make, or Bernard too involved, controlled by Ford. They do say that they took brains out of them, and the brains were all blank, like they'd never been used, like maybe they were supposed to be
because they're in the water.
People.
They're in the water now.
Right, because the data's in the water. I forgot.
You got to decrypt it though.
Of course. Decode that shit.
Yeah.
Okay, I think that wraps up this episode. Please do send your theories and thoughts to showswhatyouknowshow@gmail.com, and tweet at us at showswhatyouknow. That's you with the letter U. That's where we let you know when we're going live. Or you can just find us by searching Westworld Theories on your podcast app of choice. And please do go ahead and leave a review on that iTunes. It would really help us out.
Yes, please. I have one more question for you though.
What's that?
Is this now?